Okay, let's get started. Today we'll discuss something called static. Okay, before that, since we have started working on some programs, writing some Excel and all, there are certain rules that you have to follow. There are certain rules that you have to follow while naming a class. There are certain rules that you have to follow while naming a method. Okay, those rules are called naming conventions. Right? Name is naming. Conventions are nothing but standards or rules. Okay, basically it's the standards that everyone is following. So let me show you. Do you know what a camel case is? Have you heard about something called camel case? One second. Okay, so camel case is just like a camel which is not straight, right? A camel is like the neck is high, then then it's, or basically the head is high, then the neck is low, right? So it goes up and down just like a wave. So that is known as camel case. So for example, let's say naming convention. Okay, sample task. If you see each word, these are two different words: naming and convention. Different words: bank, account, cell phone. You see, each word, bank is a separate word, account is a separate word. So each word, if you're using camel case, each word should start with a capital letter. So that is what is known as camel case. Okay, and Java uses camel case. So if you're naming classes, the class name should be something like this. Every unique word or every word should start with capital letter. Okay, so these are some of the rules called naming conventions, standards that people follow. And if you don't follow the standard, what it projects like you don't have much of experience. Remember, when you go to a project, you are being projected as someone who holds 5 years of experience. So there you cannot make these silly mistakes. Mistakes like, your class name should always follow camel case. I cannot create a class something like this. Let's say this is good. What is bad is something like this. Okay, so these are some of the naming conventions. I'll share this with you again. Okay, so these are some of the rules that are available out there that everyone follows. So let's see a couple of them. Classes. Class name should be nouns, and it says it should be in mixed case with each internal word capitalized. So if you see here, image sprite. Image is a different word, sprite is a different word. So S is caps, I is caps. Likewise, bank accounts. B is caps, A is caps. So if you look at all the examples that I've shared, you will see everything following a camel case. All the class names. Equilateral triangle. Equilateral is a different word, triangle is a different word. And every different word should start with a capital letter. Okay, hello world. Hello is a different word, the world is a different word. Okay, so that's the naming convention for class names. We'll discuss about interfaces later, but they follow the same rule as classes. Next, we discuss methods. Okay, methods also follow camel case, but the first word should be lowercase. Unlike class, the first word which has to be uppercase, for methods, the first word has to be lowercase. Okay, like for example, we discussed about a class called calculator. You see here, so the name of my method is add numbers. I should not do something like like this. This is wrong. Even though you'll not get any compilation error, it does not follow the Java standard. So your method name should always start with lowercase, and the next word should start with uppercase. It should not be something like this. This is bad. Okay? Every unique word, every different word should start with a capital letter. Okay, so that is the methods. And just like the methods, the instance variables also should follow the camel case. If you look at my examples, number underscore 1, I can use underscore in instance variables. Let's say bank account. Let me open bank account. So you see here, account number. Account number is a different letter. So account number. The word N should mean caps. Every word should start with a capital letter. Okay. So this is what is known as camel case. Okay. Class name should follow. The first letter should be capital letter. Whereas a method and the instance variable should follow camel case, but the first letter should be lowercase. Okay. Here, what is naming conventions? And from now, every program you write, every line of code you write should follow this naming conventions. If you do silly mistakes like this, people will instantly know that you don't have much of experience. Okay, so we should not make such silly mistakes. So please make sure you read through the standard guide and follow that. Is that clear, everyone? Any questions on naming conventions? Okay, fine. Let's move on to the next topic. Next topic is something called static. Okay. So what is the meaning of static? Who can give me? If I say, I got a static, what is static? If I search Google, it says static is fixed or in stationary condition, right? So then that means no change, something which does not change. So that is known as static. Now let's try to understand what is the importance of static. Okay. Before that, as I said earlier, these characteristics of a particular class are known by different names. They're known as attributes, they're known as fields, and they're also known as instance variables. Okay, instance variable. We know it is known as variable. An instance variable is something that belongs to an object. So if I say variable, or if I say instance variable, or if I say field, or if I say attribute, all means the same. Okay, so these words will be being used interchangeably, but end of the day they all mean the attributes in a class. Attributes in a class which can be accessed only by the object. Okay, so these are known as instance variables. Okay, now if I want to show you, okay, let me create a bank account. So I'll say I have a class called bank. Okay, we have a bank account, and in that we have variables like name, SSN, simple, and let's create objects. Okay, so I'll say OPJ CT1. So we create account num 1 which belongs to Tom because son is 1 something like this. He lives in some junk address. Okay. Next we'll create another address called another object called account 2 belongs to Sam. Whose son is so and so, whose address is so and so. Okay. And we have 100, this guy has 250. And account 3, his name is John, whose son is, say this guy's balance is this. Okay. So these are all objects, right? We have seen that all these things are objects. These things are objects which are independent, right? Objects which are not aware of other objects. So these are known as instance variables because each object is having its own copy of the variable. Account 1 has no clue what is the name of account 2. Likewise, account 2 has no clue what is the balance of account 3. Right? Every object has got its own copy in the memory. So these are known as instance variables. Okay. Now, what if I want to have a common variable across all the objects? Okay. Like for example, let's say there are some values like a variable called minimum allowed balance. So my minimum allowed balance in a account is $10. You cannot withdraw less than $10. Okay, I'm just throwing an example there. Now, this particular value is common for all objects, right? Irrespective of whatever balance you have, the value minimum allowed balance, your balance should not be less than this value. So this particular value is something that is common for all objects. Okay? Do you think it makes sense to create a copy like this, or does it make sense to have one single copy? Which one do you think is efficient? One or multiple? Two options. One or multiple. Which one is efficient? Okay. So for constant values, as you all have answered, for constant values, right? Again, I said this value is not changing for object. If you look at other values are changing for every object. But if there's something that is constant, that does not change for an object, you can mark that particular variable as something called static. Okay. Let me show you. So let me create int minimum balance. Okay. So minimum balance is equal to 10. Now I will use the word static, S-T-A-T-I-C. When I use the word static, if I use the word static, what the compiler will do is it will create variable at the class level. Okay, so this is known as class variable. Anything that you make static is something that is available at the class level and which something that all objects can share. Okay, unlike instance variables, you do not create copies of this class variable. Okay, is that clear? Do you guys understand what is the difference between an instance variable and a class variable or a static variable? I'll show you how this works, but do you understand the basic concept? If you mark a variable as static, that belongs to a class. It does not belong to an object. And all objects share the class variables. Okay. Now let's see that in some examples. For example, here I'm saying minimal balance is 10. Okay. So let me create a couple of accounts. I created one account, bank account 1. From, let me create account 2. Account 2, I want to deposit, let's say $200 just to differentiate. John, account number is 9999. So here we are creating two accounts. Now let me run this program. So here the balance of Tom is 2100. Balance of, I should say, copy paste here. Balance of John is 2200, right? So each object is having its own data. Now take a look. I'll say plus load balance, load min balance. Plus I'll say ACCT1 dot minimum balance. Now let me run this program. So if you see, both the values are 10. And if you see here, I mark this as static. And this belongs to the class. Okay. Now I said static variable, or also known as class variable, is something that is shared by multiple objects. Right? Let's do one thing. Here, I will change the value. I'll change the value of account1 dot minimum balance is equal to, I'll make it as 50. Okay. Now, earlier example, the value was 10 and 10. When I run this program, you will see the value is 10 and 50. You see here, even though I changed the value on account 1, the value got reflected in account 2. Right? Because, as I stated earlier, anything that you mark static belongs to the class. And the class variable is something that is shared by multiple objects. So in this case, I changed the value of minimal balance on the account 1. And when I access the same value from account 2, since both are sharing this variable, since both are, this is a static variable, we are able to see the value. Is that clear? What is a static variable? What is the difference between an instance variable and a static variable? Is that clear, everyone? I know it is late on Friday, but I would please appreciate if people answer. Okay, so there are so someone asked a question. If we put the above line here, what will be the output of minimal balance? Can you guys tell the answer? I moved the account one.minimal balance before printing. So what do you think will be the answer? Vamsi, what do you think will be the answer? So let's run. The answer is 50 and 50. Okay. So now we understand what are static. Static variables. By all the objects. Okay. Static variable is shared by all the objects. Now a static variable is something that can be accessed using the object, right? And as well as using the class. So I'm going to change this particular thing to something like, let me do one thing, just to ensure that we are seeing the change. I'll move this. Okay. Now instead of doing this, I will say don't have to create an object. A static variable, as I said earlier, belongs to a class. So I can call a variable directly using the class. So in this case, bank account dot minimal balance. Now when I run this program, if you see, I'm able to access a static variable, right? If you mark something as static, that belongs to the class. Okay, so I can access a static variable by both using the object or using the class. Is that clear, everyone? What this line means? Okay, so that is the advantage of a static variable. So if you have a variable that needs to be constant, and needs to be shared by all objects, you will mark that variable as static. Is that clear? Shall we move on? Shall we move on to the next topic? We're going to discuss static, but shall we move on? Okay. Now, just like static variable, you can mark methods also static. So if you see, the main method is static. The main method, if you don't put as static, your program will not work. When I take out static, it says main method cannot form. Okay, so let's understand why do we have to do something like this. Okay, so what I'll do is, let's say I'll create a method. I'll create a method called public void print minimum balance. Okay, I'm just putting a method called public void print minimal balance needed. Now what I'll do is I'll mark this method as static. Okay, so let me say system dot println. I've declared a method called print minimal balance needed. Now, up till now, in order to invoke an object, in order to invoke a method, I needed an object, right? Without an object, I cannot invoke a method. Like for example, there's a method called getBalance. So I cannot say getBalance, something like this. I cannot invoke a method directly. I'll get a compilation error. It says you cannot call this method. So in order to call a method, I need to have an object. Just what we used, account1.deposit. So you're calling a method using an object. Okay. Now we said static is something that belongs to a class. Right? Static is something that belongs to a class, just like a static variable. Similarly, static method, something that belongs to a class. You don't have to create an object to call this method. Okay, like for example, I can call print minimal balance method. I'll not get any compilation error. Now when I run this program, see, minimal balance required is 10. So a static method is something that can be directly called on a class. So this is equal to, let's say, what is this? Okay, so this is equivalent to calling the method on the class. Is that clear? What is a static method? Similar to a static variable, you can call the method within a class. You don't need to have an object for that. Okay. Any questions on static methods? Okay. Now let me ask you a few questions. Okay. Let me ask you a few questions here. So here I'm calling. Can I call a non-static method from a static method? Can I call getBalance? Can I call that? What do you guys think? Will that work? So I'll write here. Can a non-static method be called from a static method? Think about that. Okay, so the answer is no. Okay. So the answer is no. So if I go back, if you see, I'm getting a compilation error. And if you see, it says cannot make static reference to non-static method. Okay, why is that? Why is it not working? Because as I said, the static variable or static method belongs to the class. This guy has no clue what an object is. Similarly, it has no clue what a method of an object is. So that's why you cannot call a non-static method from a static method. Is that clear now? Did you guys understand that? Okay, let me explain. So a static method is something that belongs to a class, right? It is not aware about objects inside a class. All it knows is the static variables and static methods. So when you're calling a static, non-static method from a static method, it has no clue how many objects are there and all those stuff, right? When you say get balance on what? The get balance should belong to an object, whereas a static does not belong to an object.
Hello?
Yeah.
So can we create an instance and then call get balance from that? Is it works or will it won't work?
But does it make sense? Why would you want to create an object inside a static method?
Okay.
Right? For example, I can do something like this to answer your question. So test. Create a method object, and I can call the method on that object. But that's not the idea. The idea is here you have an object. Can I call a method without an object? A non-static method without an object. So Siddharth, your question is again, if you look at this main method, it is a static method. And within a static method, I'm calling a non-static method. But that I'm calling using an object. Okay. The question was, from a non-static method, from a static method, can I call a non-static method? The answer is no. Do you guys understand why it is no? Is that clear, everyone? Okay. Now, let me delete this. Okay. Let's do the other way. Okay. Can a static method call a non-static method? Okay. Let me just do this way. Okay. So the answer is no. Now let's do it this way. Can a non-static method call a static method? What do you think the answer is? Think about that. Can a non-static method call a static method? So the answer is yes. Since the static method belongs to the class, it can be called by anyone. Okay. So, for example, I'm saying get balance. So in get balance, I can call print minimal balance is needed. So you see, I'm not getting any compilation error. Okay. Is these two questions clear, everyone? Now, the third question. Can a static method call another static method? What is the answer? So the answer is yes. There is nothing. It is very, very simple. It's already a static method belongs to a class. So a class method is calling another class method, as simple as it is, right? So if you see here, from the main method, which is static, I can call the print minimum balance needed method. Because they both belong to the class. They don't belong to a object. Okay, is that clear, Manoj? Okay, very good. So this is what is static all about. A static is something that belongs to a class. That's what you have to remember always. Then, if you remember that, you can answer any question belonging to the static. Okay, is that clear? What is static all about, and when to use, and what is the use of it? You typically use static variables for constant values that are shared by multiple objects. Like for example, in this case, minimal allowed balance. Any questions on static? Okay, let me test your understanding. P is the main method static. Is a famous interview question. Who can tell me why do we have to mark the main method static? I'll give you a minute to answer. Okay, so the reason why the main method is static, okay, I'll explain that. Now let's assume this method is not static. Okay, let's, so for the sake of example, in order to invoke this method, if this method does not belong to the class, in order to invoke this method, you have to create an object, right? If it is a non-static method, in order to access the method, you need to have a object. Now, if I have a constructor, something like this, how will, if I want to run this program, if I want to run bank account, and if you don't specify the main method as static, how will Java know that it has to pass some value to this account number, to this constructor? Since Java has no idea what to pass into a constructor, the designers of Java decided that the main method should be static. So that when you run this program, when you actually run this program, internally calls something like this. Internally calls bank account.main. It is able to invoke the main method without creating an object of the class. That's the reason why the main method is static. So that Java can invoke the main method without creating an object. It can say like this. So when you actually run when you actually run Java bank account, Java internally calls bank account dot name and passes the data. Okay, that is the reason they decided that main method should be static. Okay, is that clear? Why main method is static? And this is the interview question where they will ask you why is the main method static. So please make sure you understand that question and you are able to answer that. Okay, so there is a question. Manoj, what do you want me to explain again?
How is main method static? Can you explain that again?
How or why?
Why?
So if I don't mark this method as static, how will the Java run that method? In order to invoke this, we all know that in order to run a program, it calls the main method. Okay. Now let's assume we don't mark the main method as static. How will Java know to create an object? Okay, let's see the difference here. So when you run Java bank account, if the method is static, it's bank account dot main, which is good, right? Simple, straightforward. Now let's assume the method is not static. If the method is not static, then Java has to do something like this, right? Bank account TCT 0 is equal to new bank account. They have to create an object, and within on the object it will call the main method, right? These are the only two ways to invoke a method. If it is a static, you can invoke on the class. If it is an object, you invoke on the. If it is a non-static, you invoke on the object. Two possible ways. Now, what if I, as a programmer, I decided that you cannot create an object by not without specifying the details. So I added a constructor here. I added a constructor and saying that if you want to create an object, you need to specify the account number. Now, how will Java know what to give the account number? Now, do you understand why the main method is static? Okay. It's like, I've given you a keys to a car and I've asked you to drive without knowing what the engine is, right? Without knowing the internals of the engine, you're able to go start the car and run. Why? Because you insert a key and you turn, the car will start. You don't have to know how the engine is running and all this. Likewise, the main method is entry point to your program, right? So if you, since that is static and you're asking Java to run, Java knows only one thing. Okay, the class will have a static main method. I will go and call the main method. I don't have to create the object. But if you don't mark it as a static, Java has no idea how to create an object. Okay, so that is the reason the main method is designed as static. Clear, everyone? Okay, so there is one question. Are these two same? Is line number 51 and line number 52 same? What do you guys think? Siddharth, what do you think? That, you there? Okay, I can't hear you. So these two are same. And reason being, these two belong to a class. And since you're already in a static method, I don't have to specify the class name. Right? The main method is already static. So even if you call the method directly, or even if you call using the class name, they both mean the same. So this method belongs to the class. Okay? So that is what is static all about. Static is something, anything that you mark as static, it belongs to a class. It does not belong to an object. And all objects of that class share that particular instance. Okay. Is it clear, everyone? What is static and all?